This is happening so fast. So the ways this is going to evolve, we can't really anticipate beyond a year or two. And I think it's good that the velocity of spend and capital formation is all going to get less friction in capital formation, easier to start companies, easier to engage visitors, easier to monetize yourself as an individual. It's going to be wild. It's going to be fun. Or think of us as running inside your four walls, but yes, it runs in the cloud. And so you're just going to use our software to collect your first party data, define your attributes that you want to, your own language to enrich this data with. Tealium's original mission was to help the largest companies in the world collect and enrich and then create experiences around their first party data, their customer data. So as software ate the world, and the customer experience was created by more and more specialized software packages. Each of those software packages had its own data set around the customer. And we felt the industry needed a neutral provider to come in, kind of the way TIBCO did in the mainframe era or WebLogic did in the app server era, and be a neutral provider that connected to all these upstack systems and to all the downstack transactional systems and listened to the event level data from customer experience systems, resolve that event level data around visitor profiles. So we basically turn machine data into human data, and then allow companies to enrich those profiles with their own language, right? So a big pharma company might have different attributes they would assign than maybe a big airline would or a big bank, and Tealium works with 10 of the 20 largest banks in the world, 6 of the 10 largest telcos, 3 of the 5 largest airlines. So these companies have customer data flowing everywhere. And, so we'll perform that identity function, we'll allow them to enrich that data. This all happens, Craig, on a high performance real time platform. And it all is on a governed and trusted platform because, we've had privacy regulations around the world. And so now a big airline, big pharma, big hotel chain, big e-commerce company can collect all this data, follow privacy regs, and then use trusted and compliant customer data to fuel customer experiences. And now this was all happening in the MarTech, AdTech, CRM landscape prior to AI. It turns out that as these big companies embrace AI and start using AI to fuel customer experiences, this is the data set that they need to populate the context window, right? To give you this real time context, the behavioral data around your customer's activity that the LLM needs to understand, right? And the LLM likes structured data, it likes labeled data, and that's exactly the stuff that Tealium produces or helps our customers produce. So that's kind of a long introduction, but it's all about basically a trusted platform. And whether companies use Tealium or not, they have to solve this mandate, right? They have to follow privacy regulations. They really need to get this customer visibility into real-time customer data because that real-time data gives you the highest intent signal, whether you're an e-commerce platform or a travel platform or whatever. And that those intent signals or what that data is what the models can use. And by the way, this isn't always an LLM. It could be a fraud algorithm model. It could be a um, cat boost model. It could be an LLM. But basically more data equals better outcomes with AI, but it's not just a completely unlimited fire hose of data. We're now learning in AI that giving too much context can lead the models to wander, right? So, one of our founders talks about instead of finding the needle in the haystack, how about creating smaller haystacks? And so, you kind of want to give that tighter, higher resolution profile to the model so that it can do its thing.
Yeah, and let me ask some questions about that. That's interesting, and I haven't sort of broken down this data aggregation and rationalization process. So, how many different channels can you pull data from, and how many different formats, or not specifically, but you know,
Sure. So basically, anything that's digital, so the web, mobile apps, call centers, point of sale, set top boxes, over the top television, kiosks, ATMs, store data, from Wi-Fi routers and stores, basically any kind of event level data. Um, and we take that again, that machine level data, and we resolve it then around identity so that you get an actual visitor profile. And it all happens in real time. So it's a big, compute load at real time, and then we allow that profile to be available back to, like let's say it. Put AI aside for a minute. If you're just doing classic online advertising, so Meta, Google, Snapchat, Pinterest, Reddit, they all have conversion APIs, and when you're a customer's visiting, you can send them data in real time, and you give them feedback on what is converting, and then they actually use AI behind the scenes to basically help companies dial in the focus for their audiences that they're targeting. And we're seeing an average of 26% improvement on return on ad spend for companies using these conversion APIs. And so, I mean, you talk about there's 500 billion or whatever of digital ad spend just in the US and Europe this year, probably. So 26% of that is a pretty big number. Um, and then when you add AI to it, we're seeing even tighter and more impressive outcomes. Like we had, an auto dealership that was using Snowflake and Tealium to get their data act in order, and they went from a 16% conversion rate at the bottom of the funnel, people that bought a car, to a 30% conversion rate, right? So more than doubling.
Yeah. And when you say that all that data coming in, it's got to be put into a machine readable format, right? If you're getting call center data, how does the system convert that? Is it converting it into vectors, or is it using natural language?
So
Does it separate natural
now
language?
we have, think of us as before like the vector store or the graph database. Now for AI purposes, we definitely are helping vectorize this data and using graph databases to show the relationships of the attributes. But prior to that, just the core Tealium platform is a deterministic, not a probabilistic model. And we just understand all, we have 1,300 connectors that we call them connectors, but where we can ingest inbound data. And part of building one of those connectors is understanding the data format you're going to get from that source, right? From a, you know, Samsung TV or from a mobile app or whatever. And then you map field by field these elements that are going to come in on the event level data. And then our customers can use, we call it an identity key ring, but multiple different um, dimensions can be combined in identity key ring to resolve around identity and to turn this event level data and associate it with a human, right? And so it could be email address, it could be device ID, it could be some other signature, URLs, all that kind of stuff. And so that all happens deterministically. And this is a pretty key point, Craig, because there are a lot of folks out there talking about probabilistic matching and things like that. But when you look at global privacy regulations, you cannot have probabilistic anything going on, because if a customer, one of the most important things we do is we capture the consent status of a customer, of a visitor to any of these digital, channels, and then we propagate that downstream to all the systems that can benefit from knowing that consent status, right? Because this company over here can target, if they target someone who just opted out, they can get fined. And it's very important that you don't start saying, "Oh, we think this person might be, or these events might come from that person, so we're probabilistically going to stitch them together." And then you start targeting that, and if your probabilities were wrong, you are now in violation of privacy regs, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and all this is happening in real time.
Yes.
In the cloud. I mean, are you a SaaS platform?
Yes, we are. So the way to think of it is, Tealium, I would say, like, we're just software. Like, think of, when you're talking to a customer, think of us as running inside your four walls, but yes, it runs in the cloud. And so you're just going to use our software to collect your first party data, define
Mhm.
your attributes that you want to, your own language to enrich this data with. And we think of it kind of in three tiers, right? So you've got all your customer experience systems that are typically outside the firewall. Also, now they're mostly cloud-based systems. Every once in a while, you still have a big bank or something running a CMS on-prem or something like that. Then you have uh, Tealium, which creates this trusted data layer, and think of it as kind of like a high performance cache that sits at the edge of the network. And then in the back office, you will have your your transactional systems like a DDA system or credit card processing system, and you might have like your data warehouse, right? Like a CDW, like a Snowflake or Databricks or uh, Redshift from Amazon or Google, Big Tables, and then or BigQuery, sorry, and then those are what we call kind of like the stateful at rest backend customer data systems where you want to run your heavy workloads and your heavy analytics and things like that. We are the high performance cache where when someone is visiting one of your properties, you want to have that profile at the ready so you can populate, send it to the LLM in an AI use case or send it to the media property in an ad tech use case in real time with the most up to the millisecond behavioral data, right? Because it's what I'm looking at in the current session gives you much more intense signal than what I was looking at 2 days ago or 2 years
Yeah.
ago. Right.
Yeah. Wow. And presumably, you've been developing your platform or your software as AI has gone through these successive advances, and right now we're in the agentic phase. I'm a little bit of a skeptic on agentic AI. I think there's a lot of what are they calling it? Agent washing, where there's not necessarily some real agency there. But can you talk about how your system has adapted to those changes?
Sure. So first of all, yes, there's probably a lot of agent washing going on, Craig, but uh, one of my favorite science fiction writers has a saying, which is the future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed, right?
Right. Right. Yeah.
And if you look at, for example, in crypto, there are already entire agent economies like on virtuals and pump.fun where agents are interacting with other agents. And Pump has 750 million a day of activity, and Virtuals has 125 million per day. It like their own economies. And so what we believe, and this year, by the way, you're already gonna have 136 billion of agentic commerce in 2025,
Wow.
and that is predicted to go to 1.7 trillion of agentic commerce in 2030.
Yeah.
So we're
Can I just stop and have you? I'm not familiar with Pump or with the other platform. And
Virtuals. Yeah.
virtuals, and when you say agentic commerce, just give me an example of a transaction that you're talking about.
Yeah. So a transaction, it's like Pump.fun, they're trying to compete with Twitch, where a creator can go on to Pump and do their stream just like you would with your podcast, and they get paid based on activity, how many people are watching them in the Pump token, and it's kind of wild, but it is going. And that's the bleeding edge. Now, the mainstream is gonna grow rapidly because we see the biggest players in commerce and media promulgating protocol standards that are either being developed or are in production. The most high vis one so far was the OpenAI uh, agent commerce protocol that they and Stripe announced this week. And I went on to OpenAI and I, shopped on Etsy and went all the way to the shopping experience still within the OpenAI. So you've got this agent commerce protocol, ACP. We all know what MCP was, model context protocol. So I say MCP basically was giving agents hands, giving them the ability to go do something like maybe make a reservation, but it didn't give them the ability to do a financial transaction. So now you have all these different protocols coming at you. So the Ethereum group has promulgated ERC 8004 as a standard for agent identity. So this is a new trust layer that will go on. And then you've got Coinbase, which promulgated X402, which is a payment standard. And then you have Google, which promulgated A2A, agent protocol, and they then have agent commerce protocol, which is inclusive of and supportive of the X402 from Coinbase. So you have Google and Coinbase basically setting a standard. You got OpenAI and Stripe setting payment standards. And so agentic commerce is simply where I can have my agent, like ChatGPT or any other, go do a transaction for me in the future. So there's a couple things there. So I have spent 30 years in fintech, and I'm on the board of a bank, and helped the team launch the world's first internet bank back in the late 90s. So the intersection of technology and finance, which is now known as fintech, has been going on a long time, and it's very fascinating to watch. But what we saw over the last 30 years, Craig, between the internet revolution and the mobile revolution, we're seeing even more change happen now over the next 4 years than we saw over the past 30. And because all the rails are built, and so we believe there will be 1.7 trillion, and other, third parties, not Tealium, are predicting that by 2030. That's a little over 20% of global digital commerce. So, I mean, if you're that, I think that's kind of a mid to bearish forecast. If you're bullish on it, it could be half, because, like Gartner's saying, 95% of B2B buying journeys in next year, 2026, are going to be initiated through agents. Now, that sounds kind of crazy, but if you think about it, think about your own behavior, right? How much are you now starting it? This is B2B. Think about it. So I'm here at Tealium and I want a new HR system. I'm not going to Google it anymore. I'm going to ask ChatGPT what the leading vendors are and which is the best fit for Tealium. And so I could see where probably that 95% next year is pretty accurate. So at the top of the funnel, the shopping or the searching will start with agents. And so it's just logical connection that these intelligent agents, once they have like an identity trust layer, like what ERC 8004 provides, and payments capability, what like A2P or A2A provide, um, then we are going to see agentic commerce. And so we're preaching to our customers. We have about 700 customers around the world that, this is coming. And so you need to build agentic front doors to your business, right? And our belief, again, having watched the web and the mobile for the last 30 years and how that changed everything, and anticipating what's going to happen over the next 4 years, our belief is that your current, let's say you're a company that has 1 million digital interactions a day today. Okay, so that's your total digital customer engagement number. Well, in 2030, we think you'll have 2 million, double the number of digital interactions. We think the current million aren't going to really go away, because human behavior it's a slow slope. It's not an event. And so you need to preserve everything you're doing to be successful and competitive with the current digital world. The other million are going to be agentic, right? And so you need to have that agentic front door that, by the way, it doesn't look like a website, right? It's not going to be agents coming to use browser interfaces. Yes, agents can use browser interfaces. So, yes, that your website maybe will work to convert some visitors. But if you have a high performance agentic front door that supports all these protocols, the trust, the identity, the payment protocols for agents, then you're going to get more of the business than your competitor who doesn't have that, right? So, we're preaching you're running the risk if you're not thinking about this now and architecting for it right now, you run the risk of losing a generation, right? So, 10, 15 years ago, if you did not launch a mobile app, you lost a generation. You don't have any of my kids that are in their 20s and early 30s. And then 20 years ago, if you didn't launch a website, you lost a generation. You lost, my generation. And so, and even before that, if you didn't launch a voice response system, you lost a generation. So companies will lose an entire generation if they do not lean into this. Now, what's what's very interesting, Craig. So when you support enterprise companies that have to follow global privacy regulations, while we are evangelizing, they lean into it. They also now increasingly are setting up basically AI risk committees or AI approval boards where before you do anything with AI, you have to kind of send it up to the board. And that's actually slowing big companies down and giving smaller, more agile companies or more risk oriented companies an advantage. And so now what we're seeing is there was this concept, of privacy by design, that kind of came 10 years ago and when Europe started with GDPR. And we think the best practice now in the big companies is they're actually taking these people from the AI approval board and embedding them in the development teams that are building these projects because it's kind of like having an embedded media person like you out on the battlefield, right? So you just that helps bigger companies speed this up. But we believe it's just what I call a strategic mandate. Embrace it and build for it, or you'll miss a generation.
And you're talking about not just preparing training data, you're talking about governance and how agentic needs real-time policy enforcement. Is that right?
Yeah, it's governance and it's so the training data you can't really use unless you've anonymized it. You
Yep.
can't really use customer data in your training because of the privacy problem, right? Because
Right.
those customers may opt out at any time, and then that taints your whole model. So, for customer specific AI use cases, you need to wait and populate the context window at time of inference. And that is the data that I'm talking about, where this high performance trusted cache that can give you the visitor profile at time of inference comes in really handy.
Yeah, it's amazing how this stuff is developing. And uh, uh, com- uh, uh, consumer data platforms, um, uh, 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 are are they are you providing dynamic control systems for this AI first world that we're looking at?
So, yeah, the product category we invented back in 2013 is called customer data platform,
Yeah.
and it
Oh, I'm sorry, not consumer. Yeah,
yeah, that's
customer.
all right. It was such a good idea that 4 years later we had 130 competitors, other companies saying, "Oh, we do customer data platforms." So, um, the simple idea was what I started with. Just okay, you got all this data everywhere about your customer, and you need to resolve it into visitor profiles and be able to leverage it, but also govern it. And so then when AI kicks in, um, and if you think about this agentic world, prior to AI, there was this concept in Martech called journey orchestration. where
Yeah.
you could send a customer down different paths. And what we always preached was, look, you can't do some beautiful WYSIWYG customer journey map, in a software interface because you just run out of there's too many permutations of possibilities on most
Yeah.
digital. And so what you really do is you orchestrate customer journeys by orchestrating data. And so when a customer does this, you enrich the profile. Then you have rules upon which the customer, you can enhance the customer experience based on what they just did. And then you have more rules and more rules. And so through data orchestration, you can do amazing journey orchestration. And so thinking about agent orchestration is sort of the next logical step, right? So it's now, whereas these business rules that you were doing data orchestration with and journey orchestration with were deterministic, within the agent world, everything is a little probabilistic. Now it's
Yeah.
getting more and more tight, right? Like, um, we I tell my team all the time, like, you have to fly the airplane looking out of the front of the cockpit. I was a naval aviator way back, and it's like you don't fly the airplane looking in the rearview mirror. And so you have to assume this technology is getting better and better. So 3 years ago, we saw 15% um, hallucination rates. And so
Yeah.
all the naysayers were saying, well, you can't use AI, 50% hallucination. Well, it's now less than 1% in 2025. It'll be less than 0.1% 2026. So you have to assume these things are getting closer to deterministic. Um, and what will happen is you'll have an agent that, you'll ask it a question. Here's an example. So one of our customers did this. They said, okay, so this visitor is on our website. This is a large global chip company. They're on our website, and they've looked at these three products and our 80,000 part SKU. Speculate for me what industry they work for, what kind of project they're working in, and in what three other SKUs our sales team should call them about tomorrow to include in their project research. So, kind of a B2B use case. And then they would ask the LLM that. The LLM would answer with the three parts, and they'd put that in the CRM, and then the sales rep would get a notice,
Yeah.
right? So, okay, now call this person. Now it's very simple to say, let's just put that back in the website in real time right now, too, right? And so that kind of thing is what we're seeing, very simple but very high value AI use cases with this data.
Yeah.
That
Yeah. And
that could be the first agentic output, and then there could be another one and another one if you think about it, and that
yeah.
would guide the customer journey.
But is this all uh, being orchestrated by a reasoning agent, or do you have sort of rules in place? What's the control mechanism for deciding what you're going to send to the website, what you're going to send to uh, the CRM and that sort of thing?
Yeah, so the control mechanism pre-AI is we have rules, and we'll say, if a customer abandons their shopping cart with three items in it, then you would add them to a retargeting audience on Google or Criteo or whatever, right? And then, or if a customer converts and buys something, then you would suppress future media. I mean, how many times you've been retargeted for stuff you already bought? You're like, these people are wasting their money,
Yeah.
especially for a long considered purchase. Like, I just bought a leased a car. Well, that's going to be a 3-year lease. So why waste money advertising to be for the next 2 years at least? And so those things were rules that our customers set up. Now, and again, the action then happens through these connectors we talked about.
Mhm.
So now it'll simply be you'll ask a model what you should do, and you can ask the model any question you want, as you know. So you can say, hey, given this audience profile that this person fits in and their recent activity, what is the next best product recommendation we could put to them the next time they visit, or even on the next page in session, right? That's where, when you get into the real time, it's really the in session change of journey. And if you take this to its logical conclusion, Craig, uh, every like the concept of an audience we think is dead. We've been preaching that for a long time. Basically, every visitor is an audience of one, and you're going to create a personalized experience for them. And then ultimately, and I don't know if this is 1, 2, or 3 years, if you think about like what Sora can do and all these other real-time content generations, like every visitor should have their own visual and audio
Yeah.
experience, right? Now, remember, that's still the first million interactions. Now, for the other million interactions where their agent comes on their behalf to transact, that'll be different. That'll be through, APIs, and there'll be data flowing back and forth, but it will still, you can still determine and modify what you send to their agent that is working on their behalf to drive conversion. And, a conversion isn't just an e-commerce term, right? We work with large banks, large
Yeah.
lenders. Just filling out a loan application is a conversion, that's super high value for a bank. Um, and almost every business in big pharma, where you're dialing in different content to different audiences, right? So if someone, and by the way, as controlled by geography. So if you're going to tell a cancer patient, you're going to give them different content than you are a cancer researcher, than you are a cancer doctor, than you are a pharmacist, right? You can have
Yeah.
different content to each of those audiences depending on who they are and what they're looking at. And so super high value use cases like that, that then the pharma company can actually kind of connect the dots on, okay, when I put this in and I started dialing in my content, we saw a script lift of 32% or whatever in
Right.
Spain when we started targeting content for this new oncology drug we're launching in Spain.
Right. But that moment when the system is figuring out next steps, is that a human operator that's looking at the data and entering a prompt, or is that a reasoning
That's a
uh,
reasoning engine,
model?
and
Yeah.
that's the point of, it's just going to get faster and faster.
Right. Right.
And obviously inference, everybody is working very hard to make inference faster, and inference is getting 30 times faster. The latest NVIDIA chips, the inference is 30 times faster. And that's not just optimizing at the chip, it's optimizing through networking and algorithms. And that's 30 times faster in 1 year. Now, think of that compared to Moore's Law.
Yeah.
Moore's Law is what, doubles every 2 years or something like that. And
Yeah.
so the exponential pace at which AI performance is improving is kind of hard for the human mind to comprehend. And so inference, that's what I mean by it. It's pretty clear that we're going to go to where reasoning right now could take 30 seconds. Reasoning will take 0.3 seconds, and you'll still get all the benefit of that reasoning.
Yep.
And there are companies, hardware specific companies like Grok with a Q and Cerebrus, which is building a super large chip,
Right.
that are basically optimizing just for inference. And then there's NVIDIA and others that are, optimizing for training plus inference. But it's
Yeah.
all just going to get faster and faster and faster,
Yeah.
where the end state is you get your personalized reasoned output as a consumer that is only for you.
Yeah. I mean, we started talking about governance, and governance, and you were saying how it's slowing some companies down, and that's creating opportunities for others. But I can see with this system as it gets faster, governance becomes less and less of a bottleneck. Uh, but can it accelerate innovation? it seems to me it would still hinder innovation.
Yes, I mean, governance and privacy compliance, it definitely slows you down. I mean, if you just look
Mm,
at drug approval in the USA, like,
yeah,
the 3 phases and how long it takes, and even after a phase 3 trial, it might be a year before the FDA does their review and approves a medication. It's like, why does that take so long? So, of course, because of safety. But everything should happen faster, right? Drug approval should happen faster. Customer experiences in the enterprise should happen faster. And the way to speed that up is to make it programmatic, right? And have an air traffic control layer for your data, or air traffic control for your data layer.
yeah,
And if you're going to impose governance, data governance, it's way easier to impose it at one centralized choke point, if you will, than it is in a bunch of different distributed places. And that is one of our value propositions. Again, whether you do this with Tealium or build it yourself, having all of this, the data that is subject to privacy regulations, right? Which is your customer data. So you don't
yeah.
need your supply chain data and other data to come through, but all of your customer data needs to come through here. That's where we track consent, we understand the provenance of the data, and then we can activate the data by and activate a customer experience by sending the data out to all these different systems. But that's with a consent known status. That all can happen in real time. It doesn't need to be a batch process, and so you dramatically decrease your regulatory burden when you basically uh, uh, adopt this architectural approach of having this neutral, trusted data layer.
How deep is the penetration of this technology? I mean, it's funny you mentioned, buying something and then for the next week you get ads served to you. I mean, it seems to me that that should have been solved a long time ago. As you're saying, it is solved, but it hasn't penetrated. How, from your point of view, how, I mean, I guess for Tealium is kind of an unlimited market. Uh, it's going to take a long time to saturate that market. Where do you think the economy is on that?
So, I think again, even pre AI, we still run into companies where they're still using week old audiences to run email campaigns. And these are the
Yeah,
biggest companies in the world. And then, when you come in and you change that to real time, you get, 50+% improvements in email open rates, right? We just had a published case study with Legal in General over in the UK, the largest asset manager there, and they saw a 54% improvement in open rates just by doing stuff with Snowflake and Tealium. And so we still see a lot of pre AI low hanging fruit, and the more regulated the industry, probably the slower they've been moving. And but that's why you get these new new banks where they don't have all of the old school legacy stuff, or the Affirms with Max Levkin, who's tech genius, right? And he's just moving faster, or Stripe or Square. They can just move faster than the legacy institutions. And the legacy institutions are, however, have these amazing businesses, these amazing franchises built on trust. And so the whole idea is, how can we help them move as fast as the fintechs while still maintain, keeping their security and compliance people happy? And it is doable. The whole key is getting high enough in the organization that you get executive sponsorship for one of these
yeah,
projects. Because I'll tell you, the biggest impediment to adoption is not technology. There are no technical barriers. It is organizational confusion or turf wars or friction. And well, who owns this customer profile? Is it the marketing team, or is it the customer service team, or is it the sales team? Or, and then it's all of this who owns what that slows things down. But if you get to where the C-suite of a company is pounding on the table saying, you must do this, let's break through the bureaucracy. And one large bank we're working with has, the CEO gets briefed every week on what he calls his bureaucracy busting projects, where I want to know every week if we're making progress here, because we've just over the years built up too many layers of and confusion of ownership. And so that's really what it takes. It takes the will to embrace the risk smartly and evolve your institution and your data practices smartly, so that you can embrace this. Because again, you run if you do not have an agentic front door, you are not going to get my daughter, 32-year-old daughter. She has 3 kids. She's talking to Google and Chat GPT on her phone while she's, got the 3-month-old in her other arm. And if you don't get her while she's thinking about something, you're never
Yeah.
going to get that conversion. Like the next hour,
Yeah.
she's on to something else and another kid has a crisis or whatever. And the next day, forget it. You're never going to get her. So you
Yeah.
literally will lose a generation if you don't solve this. It's both a challenge and an opportunity for big companies of building what I call agentic front doors.
Yeah. And where do you see you obviously see agentic AI continuing to expand into the economy. Where do you think it's headed?
Like I said, there's, let's say 136 billion this year, 1.7 trillion in 2030. You'll see it, and the future's already here. It's just not evenly distributed, right? So you see it in crypto first, and then you'll see it in low value, low risk transactions, right? And then you'll see it on bigger and bigger transactions. I think it's going to be a while before my agent could go book a home loan for me, right? Um, but I do think my agent will be able to, book an air travel flight. So what's happening with these protocols is, um, an agent will be there's what ERC 8004 does is it creates like 3 levels of trust, and it creates an identity layer for agents where, my agent will get an identity token, and I, as that agent's owner, will give it an allowance, a limit. Okay, you can go spend up to $100 for me. And that agent's, so whoever's coming from the other side. And by the way, Visa and MasterCard, Visa has Visa Intelligent Commerce and MasterCard has MasterCard Agent Pay, right? So this is happening. And so my agent will have an allowance basically to go do, let's say up to $100 or up to $1,000, whatever the number is, in transactions no bigger than, 50 bucks at a piece or whatever. And that's how you'll kind of control the risk, both me as a consumer and the entities out there. But it's happening. It's going to happen
Yeah.
very fast.
And when you talk about front doors, you're not talking about APIs. I mean, the agent, if it's instructed to go buy a plane ticket, uh, will it go to the URL first, and then will there be something in the URL code that will connect the agent to its
Yeah.
interface, or will it does the agent have to call an API for that specific
So
business?
I think smarter people than me are architecting these things, but I haven't written code in 30 years. But I did at one time write code. But I think, big picture, what'll happen is it will be an API that probably it'll get sent to the same URL, which will then resolve on this, is this a human or an agent? And if it's an agent, it'll expose the data layer and, let's say the inventory available and, all this other stuff through an API. So the agent will hit the front door, go, okay, I'm sending the agent this way through an API. So I don't have to render HTML pages and all that stuff. And it'll all happen at lightning fast speed, by the way. And so the whole agentic journey. So once they've entered the the store through that API, they can do many, many different things on my behalf. Like go research a great trip to Playa del Carmen, Mexico. I like boutique hotels. I want to swim in the cenotes. My wife and I want to have dinner. Find us some cool spots. I want to see the Mayan ruins, and my agent can go do all that, right? On any Expedia or any other you know website, but let's not call it a website now. Let's call it just a digital travel service provider, and come back to me and go, either depending on how much leash I've given it, okay, I went ahead and booked it for you, or here are the three packages I found for you. Which one would you like me to proceed with? And the way, like, as these guys are fine tuning their models right now, like OpenAI a lot of times and Grok and others will say, which one of these answers do you like better? Same thing.
This is going to speed up the economy, right? At least the transactional economy.
Yeah.
And but what does that mean for society? Is that, I mean, I talk to my kids, I remember when, everything was typewriters and you needed carbon copies if you were going to CC people. Uh, you just think about how slow things were back then.
Yeah.
Uh, and yeah, things are fast today. It gives us individually a lot more free time. But how do you see that in 5 or 10 years?
Higher velocity money, I think most economists will tell you, is a net positive. And I'm like you, Craig. I remember when I started in bank technology in 1994, writing on acetate on overhead projectors, to do strategic planning sessions with banks. It's just like, I mean, there. So back then, if I in 1994, if you'd told me I'd be sitting here with you recording a podcast, like I would have gone, you're crazy. And so we can't even conceive. That's what I meant by it's taken 30 years for the internet and mobile. Well, it's only going to take 4 years for 20% of digital commerce to be agentic. Like, so this is happening so fast. So the ways this is going to evolve, we can't really anticipate beyond a year or two. And net, I think it's good that the velocity of spend and capital formation is all going to get less friction in capital formation, easier to start companies, easier to engage visitors, easier to monetize yourself as an individual. So it's going to be wild. It's going to be fun. And we just want to help all of our customers do it in a safe and compliant manner. But we want them to be able to dazzle their customers with these amazing AI powered experiences. And that's the path ahead.